In his speech at the World Economic Forum, President Trump discussed his interest in Greenland at length. For analysis on this, we're bringing in Grant Newsham, retired U.S. Marine Colonel, former U.S. diplomat, and senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy. Good afternoon, Colonel. So to start off, I want you to take a listen to this clip of President Trump commenting on Greenland today.
We never asked for anything, and we never got anything. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay? Now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made, because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
So the president says he won't use force. Colonel, your reaction to what he said, and what leverage does the U.S. have in acquiring Greenland if the relevant parties do not agree?
Well, we've never had a president like Mr. Trump, and what you see is what you get. He's serious about Greenland. The leverage, well, obviously the economic dependencies that the Americans sort of can wield over the Europeans, but also it really comes down to a question of national defense. And the Europeans have allowed their defenses to lapse to the point they're pretty much useless, or pretty close to that. And by themselves, as Mr. Trump said in his speech, there's no combination of powers in Europe that can defend Greenland. But it's not just Greenland, but it's also the threat from the Russians, from the Chinese, that Europe should recognize. It's not clear that their top leaders do. It seems almost that they've tried to sell out or are selling out to the PRC. But the military support that the Americans give to Europe and the economic sort of relationship with the Europeans, these are considerable. And it's not entirely as if everyone in Europe thinks Mr. Trump is a vulgarian, but look at what the Poles and the Americans are doing to build up their defenses. And that is part of NATO. And it does give you some sense that the Americans are not abandoning NATO, but Mr. Trump is sort of playing tough. And he is serious, I think, when he says that he wants to get Greenland. How this is going to be resolved, I don't think anybody quite knows.
Yeah, he is serious. He just posted on Truth Social that he has formed the framework, actually, of a future deal with respect to Greenland with NATO Secretary Mark Rutte. He just posted this moments ago. He said he won't be imposing 10% tariffs on February 1st. But I still want to ask you, President Trump said defending that territory is not feasible if the United States does not own it. He also pointed that the U.S. had kept Greenland in Allied hands during World War II. So I'm wondering, do you think the U.S. can achieve the same security goals without actually having ownership of Greenland?
Well, I think you can come pretty close to it, actually. I think you can, without taking ownership, you can establish your presence, and you can have the legal arrangements made, say, with Denmark, Europeans, whomever. And if push comes to shove, everybody knows that America is going to defend the place. So it is possible, I think, to have our interests sort of locked in. But as Mr. Trump says, when you own something, you look at it very differently than when you have a lease. Leases can always be backtracked on, gotten out of. But as a practical matter, and if it comes down to the sort of reaching an agreement, the Americans can get themselves ensconced there and, as they make it clear, that America is going to defend our interests and defend Greenland. One might say that even if we own the place, you could have an administration that, say, like the current British administration is doing with its territory in the Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean, where Diego Garcia, the key American base, is located. You could have a future American administration that says, well, we don't really want Greenland. It's not all that serious. We'll give it to somebody else. We'll give it back to Denmark. It's not unthinkable. So a lot depends on the will of the particular administration in the United States. But ownership versus a lease, Mr. Trump is correct in a certain sense, but is that an absolute requirement to actually have American interests and control of Greenland, that strategic territory? It's perhaps not essential, but I understand what the president thinks.
Can we get your comments on the concerns that's motivating this move? China in 2018 declared itself a near-Arctic state, announcing that it would be an important stakeholder in Arctic affairs. What do you make of the administration's position that if the U.S. doesn't take Greenland, China will.
Oh, if the Americans aren't there, you've got a vacuum. Vacuums get filled, and the Chinese will fill it. They always tell you what they're going to do, and when they declared themselves a near-Arctic state back then, despite that term not existing in international law or anywhere else, they were making it clear that they were going to get up into the Arctic, and everywhere they go, they intend to dominate it. And that's just the way it works. So if the Americans aren't there, China will get it eventually, or get such a presence that they effectively control the place. And you hear it said, well, they're not up there in great numbers. It's just some surveying ships. Well, they're down there taking a look at the sort of the seabed, and that's for submarine warfare. And this is just for starters. You have to look out 5-10 years if you want to understand how much of a risk China is. If you just say, well, what are they today? Well, maybe not so much, but if you look out 5-10 years, it'll be a much, much bigger problem for you. So when Mr. Trump talks about the Chinese and the Russians, but particularly the Chinese, he knows what he's talking about here.
Okay, so there is a threat, according to you, that China might take Greenland, but why should Americans care, right? Can you talk to us about what is the real world impact that will actually be felt by Americans if China or Russia took control of Greenland?
Well, you heard President Trump say it. He said it's the location that really matters. And he's a real estate man, so he knows the importance of location. And Greenland's location, right in sort of in a position to dominate the North Atlantic, to dominate a key sea route from the Atlantic over to Asia, but also being in a position to interrupt our future missile defenses. You can't overlook it as a place from which you can actually attack the United States. This was really an excellent position if you're an enemy of the U.S. and you want to be in a position to disadvantage the United States and potentially harm them. If you look at it from a defensive perspective, that of the United States, well, then if you have Greenland, suddenly your missile defenses become more effective, and also you have some capacity as well for offensive operations. It is key terrain if there ever was. Just got overlooked for much too long.
Okay, Colonel, just one final thing. I found this interesting, and I'm curious to hear your comments on. It's not necessarily about Greenland, but Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said that the U.S.'s role at this year's WEF is to express that globalization has failed the West and the U.S. Just finally, do you agree with that statement, and can you explain to us why?
Well, I think anybody in Youngstown, Ohio, or Erie, Pennsylvania would agree with you. Globalization was really foisted on the world by American elites as much as anyone else. And the idea was that if you send your manufacturing overseas, that's good for everybody. Well, it's good for them, but it was not good for these neighborhoods which were ravaged, set themselves up for China's fentanyl assault. This has not been a success, and I think it's been a failure. I think the secretary is correct about that. Some people got very rich off of it, but a country that doesn't make things is not much of a country, and that is something that we've sort of seen proven over the last 30, 40 years. So it could be, of course, that a subsequent administration says globalization is great, and the elites on Wall Street and the financial class will probably push that as well. But as long as this administration is around, I think they're right. And I think if you ask that question in the parts of the United States that were gutted by this rush to offshore, they would agree with you. Plus, there is also, beyond economics, there's the idea that's part of globalization. I've seen it at one of the World Economic Forum farm team events in the UAE that I was invited to some years ago. The idea is that control by a supranational organization, to include control over America and what Americans do, how they live, is a good thing. And that is part and parcel of globalization. It's not just the economic aspect to it, but there is very much a political and a control mechanism in all of this. And this administration doesn't care for that much and is trying to do something about it. So I hope the secretary is right when he said that.
Well, okay, Colonel, it's always enjoyable to hear your insight. Thank you so much today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.